الدكتور لقب الدكتور عمر أحمد عبد الرحمن دكتور عبد الرحمن.
He says, well, my name is Omar Ahmed Abdul Rahman and my title is I am a doctor. I have a doctorate degree and I would like to be called Dr. Abdul Rahman.
Why do you think the government has brought these charges against you?
لماذا تعتقد الحكومة وجهت تلك الاتهامات إليك؟
طبعا أعتقد أن ذلك إنما تم بضغط سياسي يفضل.
I think this is would have never happened unless there was some political pressure put on the government.
استجابة للنظام المصري وضغطه على الحكومة الأمريكية.
They bowed to the Egyptian regime and bowed to their pressure and
وذلك لأن النظام المصري يرى أني أبين مفاسده وعيوبه وطغيانه ولذلك يريد أن ينتقم مني فضغط على الحكومة الأمريكية.
So that's because I try to show the whole world what the Egyptian people or the Egyptian regime is doing to the Egyptian people, the way they are oppressing and torturing the Egyptian people. So they found this is a way to retaliate against me, and they put pressure on the American government to do so.
وهذا عيب وعار يسجله التاريخ على الحكومة الأمريكية.
And this is wrong, and this is a shame that history.
Intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene, and if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the darkened hour.
Omar Abdel Rahman was born in Egypt in 1938. After boarding school, he attended Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. After he graduated in 1965, he took up a post as an imam in a town outside of Cairo. He became known for promoting the Takfir ideology. This extremist ideology prescribes identifying Muslims who violate strict Islamic principles as apostates who deserve death. After criticizing Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, Rahman was imprisoned for 8 months. Upon his release, he moved to Saudi Arabia for a few years, where he developed a valuable network of contacts that supported the militant strain of Islam he had promoted. When he returned to Egypt, he became known for writing fatwas that supported the actions of terrorists. Some of his followers assassinated Egyptian President Sadat later on. But Rahman himself was acquitted due to lack of evidence of organizational ties between himself and the assassins from the group of Gamma Islamiyah.
Anwar Sadat deserved to die.
Yes, he deserved to die because of what he did. And Mubarak deserves the same thing.
Investigators say the Sheikh's trail of violence now extends to 2 countries. In Egypt, the assassination of Sadat was followed by others. A top official, a writer, and recently a campaign of terror against Western tourists. In New York, reputed followers of the Sheikh have been linked to the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Then last February, the attack on the World Trade Center. And just 75 minutes later in Cairo, the bombing of a popular cafe.
Why is it that wherever you go, people end up dead?
We can never call for violence. We call for love, forgiveness, and tolerance. But if we are aggressed against, if our land is usurped, we must call for hitting the attacker and the aggressor to put an end to aggression.
But Sheikh, it becomes a long list of self-defense.
The rumors are numerous and plenty. But where are the facts? I have never been...
December 15th, 1986. Rahman obtains his first U.S. visa via the Central Intelligence Agency. A State Department official would later discover that this was the first of 6 U.S. visas given to him between the years 1986 and 1990. All times are approved by CIA officers acting as consular officers at U.S. embassies in Sudan and Egypt. The CIA officers claimed that they didn't know the Sheikh was one of the most notorious political figures in the Middle East and a militant in the State Department list of undesirables. But one top New York investigator would later say, quote, left with the choice between pleading stupidity or else admitting deceit, the CIA went with stupidity, end quote. Abdel Rahman uses the visas to attend conferences of Islamic students inside the United States. He would then visit Pakistan, where he preaches at Peshawar, visits the Saudi embassy in Islamabad, and is lionized at receptions heavily attended by Americans. He would play a prominent role in recruiting Mujahideen fighters to fight against the Soviets in Afghanistan. In 1989, Abdel Rahman is arrested in Egypt and held under very closely guarded house arrest. But he manages to escape 1 year later, possibly by being smuggled out of his house inside a washing machine. The CIA would give him another U.S. visa, and he moves to the United States. Somewhere between 1986 and 1987, Ali Muhammad, while still an instructor at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, would frequently spend his weekends traveling to meet with Islamic activists at the Al-Kifa Refugee Center in Brooklyn. This center is the Brooklyn branch office of the Maktab al-Khidmat, which is a charity front in Pakistan closely tied to Osama bin Laden and his mentor, Abdullah Yusuf Azam. It also has ties to the Central Intelligence Agency. Muhammad teaches the Islamic activists survival techniques, map reading, and how to recognize tanks and other Soviet weapons. Muhammad frequently stays at the home of El Said Nosser, also an Egyptian radical with ties to Gamma Islamiyah and Omar Abdel Rahman. In July 1989, the FBI monitors him teaching Nosser and some of the other future members of the 1993 World Trade Center bomb plot how to shoot weapons. Towards the end of this period, Ali Muhammad informed his superiors that he had renewed his association with Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. For you see, Ali Muhammad was a triple agent. The CIA, the FBI, and members of Al-Qaeda and other radical Islamist groups, such as the Egyptian Islamic Jihad under Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and Gamma Islamiyah under Omar Abdel Rahman in New York City. Muhammad would move to Brooklyn in May of 1990, while also keeping a residence in Santa Clara, California. His connections to the Islamist network developed rapidly from this point on. Muhammad would also give talks at just how incompatible the West is with his interpretation of Islam. For you see, Ali Muhammad also played the part of a fundamentalist. Some would say it was just a part. Others would say it was the real deal.
If I am a Muslim, I can't live. Islam cannot survive in area without political domination. Islam itself as a religion cannot. So if I live in one area, we have to establish an Islamic State, because Islam without political domination cannot survive. I cannot consider Islam as a religion without political domination. So what we have what we call it Dar al-Harb, which is the word of the war, and Dar al-Islam, the word of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, the word of war. It comprises all the territory doesn't have Islamic law. So if I live in area in Egypt, for example, or in the Middle East, I will consider it Dar Harb. I will consider it the word of the war, because actually it doesn't apply the Islamic law 100%. So as a Muslim, I have obligation to change Dar al-Harb to Dar al-Islam to establish the Islamic law. It's obligation. It's not choice.
Victor Ostrovsky, an Israeli author, would later write, "By way of war, thou shalt practice deception." The Atlantic Monthly would later report that in the late 1980s in Peshawar, Pakistan, Omar Abdul Rahman became involved with the U.S. and Pakistani intelligence officials who were orchestrating the Afghan war. The 60 or so CIA and Special Forces officers based there considered him an incredibly valuable asset, according to one of them, and overlooked his anti-Western message and incitement to holy war because they wanted him to help unify the Mujahideen groups. He is unable to unify the groups, but does help coordinate some of their activities. Rahman tended to favor the two most radically anti-Western factions in Afghanistan, led by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, two of three Afghan warlord leaders, including Jalaluddin Haqqani, who allowed Arabs to integrate with Afghans in their fight against the Soviet Union. Rahman also has close links to Abdullah Yusuf Azzam, who would later become bin Laden's mentor. According to Barnett Rubin, a Columbia University professor and senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, Abdullah Yusuf Azzam was also working with the CIA to help recruit and unite the Mujahideen groups until he was assassinated in 1989. The CIA relies even more heavily on Abdul Rahman after this. Rubin claimed that the CIA paid to send him back to Peshawar to preach to the Afghans about the necessity of unity to overthrow the socialist Kabul regime. As a reward for his help, the CIA gives him a visa to the United States, even though he's on the terrorist watch list. One source who worked with the CIA supply operations at this time would later state that Abdul Rahman ties to Gulbuddin Hekmatyar put Sheikh Omar in the CIA's good books. And believe me, he would later say, when the Sheikh wanted to come to the United States, he cashed in those chips. Apparently, the CIA's ties to the Al-Qifa Refugee Center prevented other U.S. agencies from even investigating it, even after the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, when all of the bombers are found to have been tied to that center. While Al-Qifa closes itself down shortly after the bombing, it immediately reopens in Boston under a different name and continued to publish the same newsletter and posts from the same website. The New Yorker would later comment in 1994, when that the fanatical fervor the CIA whipped up leads to unintended consequences. The assassination of a Jewish militant leader in Manhattan, Rabbi Meir Kahane, the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, and a terror conspiracy to blow up the Holland and Lincoln tunnels and other Manhattan landmarks in the Landmarks Plot. The CIA tried to discourage local law enforcement agencies and the FBI from looking into the matter too deeply. After Nasser assassinated Rabbi Meir Kahane, the FBI told District Attorney Robert Morgenthau that El Sayed Nasser was a lone gunman, not part of a broader conspiracy. However, the FBI had truckloads of evidence connecting Al-Qifa, strongly suggesting otherwise, that it did not closely investigate. The FBI also blocks him from tying Sheikh Abdul Rahman to the World Trade Center bombing. Molgador would later speculate the CIA may have encouraged the FBI not to pursue any other leads. For what reason, we still don't know. However, later on, Molgador would say, quote, "The FBI lied to me. They're supposed to untangle terrorist connections, but they can't be trusted to do the job."
In December of 1990, a member of that mosque, El Sahid Nosair, was charged in the shooting death of militant Rabbi Meir Kahane. He was gunned down as he made a speech at a Manhattan hotel. At the time, a member of the mosque told me that it was just a mosque and religious school and had nothing to do with terrorism. Today, the White House confirmed the arrest of the suspect, but the acting Attorney General and the director of the FBI, Judge William Sessions, would not say much more, saying they wanted to wait till charges were officially presented in court before elaborating on the evidence.
It's a remarkable day in the history of the FBI. More details will be disclosed over time. Suffice it to say that we're interested in more than the single individual who has been apprehended, and it's material to the ability of the FBI to do its job, to be able to follow investigative leads and to follow them very quickly. And I don't want to do anything that's going to imperil that operation.
Of course, there are more arrests expected, and there has already been a second arrest connected to this case. Ibram El Jabrouni was arrested in Brooklyn today as federal agents executed a search warrant on his apartment on Prospect Park South in Brooklyn. They were looking for evidence that could be tied to the bombing. He is the brother of El Sahid Nosair, the man who was arrested in connection with the Meir Kahane homicide. So he has also been swept up in this case. He is charged with obstruction of justice for allegedly punching a federal agent during that search, but the search of his apartment was to look for evidence connected to this bombing. A case still developing, fast developing, and it looks like there will be a lid on information, at least public information that's given out through the night, so we'll be relying on our sources to try and get you more. Reporting live from police headquarters, John Miller, News 4 New York.
In 1994, a secret internal CIA report would conclude that the agency is partially culpable for the World Trade Center bombing because of its support for radicals connected to the Al-Qifa refugee center. One CIA source would later state, quote, "By giving these people the funding that we did, a situation was created in which it could be safely argued that we bombed the World Trade Center indirectly," end quote. But even after 1994, there is little evidence that the links from Al-Qifa were carefully explored by any government agency. For instance, the government would not freeze Al-Qifa's funds until shortly after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, long after it ceased to exist. Questions over the legitimacy of conspiracies that U.S. intelligence, as well as foreign intelligence services, helped to protect the notoriously radical cleric Rahman have been well known, but dismissed by those affiliated with Rahman's investigation and those working at the CIA and the FBI. But the historical record would later show that those so-called questionable theories did indeed have merit after all. During the years 1989 and 1990, Rahman would visit London and give several talks there to recruit fighters for the war in Afghanistan. The visits have been paid for by the CIA, which is said to be paying for his travel at this point and is also said to arrange U.S. visas for him. The talks are attended by future extremist leader Abu Hamza al-Masri. And for the next 2 years, Abdul Rahman would continue to exit and re-enter the United States without being stopped or deported, even though he is on the terrorist watch list. In July of 1990, Rahman was mysteriously able to enter the United States and remain there despite being a well-known public figure and being on the watch list for over 3 years now. The State Department revoked his U.S. visa on November 17th after the FBI informed that he is on the U.S. terrorist watch list. However, in December of 1990, Abdul Rahman leaves the United States again to attend an Islamic conference in Copenhagen, Denmark. He returns 9 days later and again has no trouble re-entering the country, despite not even having a U.S. visa at this point. Again, on December 16, 1990, the New York Times would publish an article entitled "Islamic Leader on U.S. Terrorist List is in Brooklyn," which makes his presence in the United States publicly known. The Immigration and Naturalization Service is said to be investigating why he had not been deported already. Yet in April of 1991, the INS approves his application for permanent residence. He then leaves the United States again in June of 1991 to go on religious Hajj in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and return to the country on July 31st, 1991. INS officials identify him coming in, but let him in anyway. In June of 1992, his application for political asylum will be turned down and his permanent residence visa revoked. But INS hearings on his asylum bid are repeatedly delayed and still have not taken place when the World Trade Center was bombed in February of 1993. Abdul Rahman then goes to Canada around October of 1992 and returns to the United States yet again. The United States and Canada claim to have no documentation of his travel there, but numerous eyewitnesses in Canada see him pray and lecture there. Representative Chuck Schumer would later state, quote, "Here they spent all this time trying to get him out. He goes to Canada and gives them the perfect reason to exclude him, and they don't," end quote. Finally, after the World Trade Center bombing in February of 1993, the United States could detain him pending his deportation hearing, but chooses not to, saying it would be too costly to pay for his medical bills. By November 5th, 1990, a breakthrough into the investigation into Rahman and a wider cell of radical fundamentalists would later come to light. El Sayed Nosair, who had just shot and killed radical Jewish supremacist Rabbi Meir Kahane at the Marriott East Side Hotel in Manhattan, New York City, was captured a few blocks from the murder site after a police shootout. An FBI informant would later state that he saw Nosair meeting with Omar Abdel Rahman a few days before the attack, and evidence including a wider plot with additional targets is quickly found. Later that night, police arrived at Nosair's house and find a pair of Middle Eastern men, Mahmoud Abalima and Mohammed Salameh, there. They are taken in for questioning. Additionally, police collect a total of 47 boxes of evidence from Nosair's house in New Jersey, including thousands of rounds of ammunition, maps and drawings of New York City landmarks, including the World Trade Center, documents in Arabic containing bomb-making formulas, details of an Islamic militant cell, and mentions of the term Al-Qaeda, recorded sermons of Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, in which he encourages his followers to destroy the edifices of capitalism and destroy the enemies of Allah by destroying their high world buildings, as well as tape-recorded phone calls of Nosair reporting to Abdul Rahman about paramilitary training and even discussing bomb-making manuals. Also found were videotaped talks of Ali Muhammad delivered at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in Fort Bragg in North Carolina, as well as top-secret manuals also from Fort Bragg. There are even classified documents belonging to the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Commander-in-Chief of the Army Central Command. These manuals and documents that clearly come from Ali Muhammad, who completed military service at Fort Bragg the year before and who frequently stayed at Nosair's house and was noted to become a loyal follower of Omar Abdel Rahman. Just how close were the CIA to Abdul Rahman, El Sayed Nosair, and Ali Muhammad? However, within hours, two investigations will connect Nosair with surveillance photographs of Ali Muhammad giving weapons training to El Sayed Nosair, Mahmoud Abalima, Mohammed Salameh, and others at a shooting range the year before. However, Ignoring all of this evidence, still later that evening, Joseph Borelli, the New York Police Department's chief detective, would publicly declare at a press briefing that the assassination of Rabbi Meir Kahane and the evidence found in New Jersey apartment belonging to El Sayed Noser was the work of a lone deranged gunman. He would further state, quote, "I'm strongly convinced that he acted alone. He didn't seem to be part of a wider conspiracy or any terrorist network," end quote. The 9/11 congressional inquiry would later conclude, quote, "The New York Police Department and the District Attorney's Office reportedly wanted the appearance of a speedy justice and a quick resolution to a volatile situation by arresting Noser. They felt they had accomplished both," end quote. Abalima and Salome are released, only to be later convicted for their participating in the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Investigators would later find in Noser's possessions a formula for a bomb almost identical to the one used in the World Trade Center bombing. As one FBI agent who anonymously would report to the New York Times, quote, "The fact is that in 1990, myself and my detectives, we had in our office in handcuffs the people who blew up the World Trade Center in 1993. We were told to release them," end quote. 47 boxes of evidence collected at Noser's house that evening are stored away, inaccessible to prosecutors and investigators. The documents found would not be translated until after the World Trade Center bombing. Noser would later be acquitted of Kahane's murder, though he would be convicted of lesser charges such as gun possession, as investigators would continue to ignore all the evidence that could suggest that Noser did not act alone, that the CIA had been monitoring El Sayed Noser, Ali Muhammad, Omar Abdel Rahman, the Al-Kifa Refugee Center, the Maktab al-Kidmat, ultimately tying it all to Osama bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, and Abdullah Yusuf Azam, the formation of Arab radical fundamentalism with direct and indirect ties to foreign and domestic intelligence services. New York District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, who prosecuted the case, would later speculate that the CIA may have encouraged the FBI not to pursue any other leads. Noser worked at the Al-Kifa Refugee Center, which was closely tied to convert CIA operators in Afghanistan, as well as ties to Abdul Rahman. So you tell me, what conspiracy by the CIA to hide the fact that the agency was closely tied to Abdul Rahman? I leave that up to you, as well as investigators working the case and to the historians following the case.
Fox News at Noon with Lynn Brown.
Good afternoon. We have new shocking details in the Michael Jackson investigation, plus what else is ahead on Fox News at Noon.
I'm Dave Monsees. The Sheikh of Araby or the Sheikh of Anarchy? Sheikh Abdul Rahman and 14 others arraigned today on charges of the World Trade Center bombing and other terrorism. Details coming up next on Fox News at Noon.
And good afternoon, I'm Julie Golden. Well, the same old story weather-wise, mostly sunny, hot and humid today, up to 93 for the high. Details on the forecast, plus we're going to be joined by some of daytime drama's favorites coming up on Fox News at Noon.
We'll get back to you early, but right now our top story. Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman and his band of alleged terrorists are due in court this afternoon. They will answer charges that they conspired to wage a war of urban terrorism that included the World Trade Center bombing. Dave Monsees is at federal court in downtown Manhattan. Dave, what can you tell us?
Well, Lynn, first of all, it is 6 months to the day after that World Trade Center bombing, and now the Sheikh and 14 others face arraignment on those charges starting in about 2 hours. It was the Sheikh that so many of those other 14 followed. But as the helicopter carrying him from an upstate prison landed in Manhattan, he faced accusations that he was far more than a simple Muslim cleric, but the authority behind a wide range of terrorism that started here back February 26th. Until the feds announced their sweeping indictments, Sheikh Abdul Rahman had been a Teflon terrorist, untouched by investigators other than for allegations that he violated U.S. immigration laws. Now, the spiritual leader of most of the 14 others indicted stands charged with conspiracy on everything from murder to obstructing justice. The government says his so-called fatwas were real, religious orders for murder and mayhem, targeting militant Jews and the government of Egypt.
The indictment is essentially not worth the paper that it's written on. And I think beyond that, you have to consider the fact that the U.S. government has unfairly stigmatized Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman for quite some time, certainly several months.
According to the indictment, the Sheikh would give the nod or forbid everything from the World Trade Center bombing to the foiled 4th of July weekend assault on city landmarks.
It was a threat. I guess it's hard to say how big a threat. Obviously, the World Trade Center explosion shows that they carried out what they talked about. So it posed a threat to New York.
Another of the religious fundamentalists indicted, El Said Nosser, already in prison from crimes related to the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Now he faces a litany of conspiracy charges and allegations he planned to break out of Attica in 1992 to get the state assemblyman and judge who put him in there in the first place.
It's rather unnerving. It's rather scary that one can stand up and speak out about things that are important, whether it's Israel, whether it's support of our policies in this country, and be targeted for assassination.
Now, the indictment against all 15 does indicate that the feds knew that something was afoot as long as 2 years ago, but no indication in the indictment as to why there was no move made on those alleged and suspected terrorists way back in 1991. I'm Dave Monsees, Fox News Live at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Back to you, Lynn.
The connection between foreign intelligence and domestic intelligence into the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, specifically the CIA and Israeli intelligence. The connection with Israeli intelligence involving the bombing came from the Ryder truck that was rented by Mohammed Salman. The number used in the Ryder truck application that was found in the VIN number and one of the debris that was found after the bombing was traced back to an Israeli woman named who Mohammed Salman was renting from, Josie Hadass. Apartment 34 Kensington Avenue, apartment number 4 in Jersey City, New Jersey. SWAT teams executed simultaneous raids on apartments in Jersey City and Brooklyn linked to Mohammed Salman. Agents said they found evidence of a bomb factory, including technical manuals, tools, and wiring, as well as physical evidence detected by a trained dog. Sound familiar? Explosives have been present, in which the dogs also found. Agents also found a letter from the resident Josie Hadass to Salman. However, Hadass was nowhere to be found. In fact, the New Jersey State Police, as well as the FBI, failed to even conduct any further investigation into just who Josie Hadass was or where she even lived. Mohammed Salman would later claim that he rented the van to haul some materials for Josie Hadass, yet it has remained unreported his point of pickup and his destination. The International Herald Tribune article dated March 8th of 1993 quoted FBI spokesman Joe Valaquet's famous response to the reporter's query about the role of Josie Hadass and the Israeli Secret Service Mossad. Quote, "Even if it were true, we wouldn't tell you anyway," end quote. It seemed the story of who Josie Hadass was ended just as abruptly as the Kahane assassination. Central Intelligence Agency would go on to deny much of what transpired during the initial years of Omar Abdel Rahman's entry into the United States. However, one thing is quite clear. The CIA did indeed shadow the movements of Rahman's many years prior to his arrival into the United States, in the same fashion that they would later shadow the movements of al-Qaeda operatives Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in the years 2000-2001, prior to their arrival inside the United States. Both men would later be involved with the hijacking of American Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon. The agency has much to answer for regarding the growth of radical Islamic fundamentalism that was responsible for the terrorist attacks of the World Trade Center in 1993 and 2001. Reverberating effects of not acting on the intelligence regarding these two events before they even happened has led us into the steadfast collapse of American civil liberties and a seemingly endless conflict with the Islamic world. But at whose benefit? That's the end of this episode. I'm your host, Adam Fitzgerald. Take care, everybody.